an hour. So I'd like to say welcome to the first SANDAS seminar for this year. We're going to have 4 seminars over the next couple of months. And if you're attending one here and you enjoy it, I'd really encourage you to promote it to promote the seminars with other people. But I'd like to start by acknowledging that we live and work and play on the lands of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people across Australia, and that these lands were never ceded and remain of enormous spiritual and cultural importance to Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples today. And we acknowledge their overarching sovereignty of the earth, the air and the seas and the rivers around which we live and work today. I'd also like to acknowledge the importance of people with lived and living experience to the sector, and to people who provide support to people with living experience, such as families. Michele and Jen are from NADA, which is it's the New South Wales Association of Drug and Alcohol. I always get it. South Wales Network of Alcohol and Drug. Anyway, NADA, which is our equivalent in New South Wales. And Michele provides clinical advice and resource development across NADA programs, including developing the informed and skilled workforce. She does advocacy and policy development and has worked as a clinician and manager in the AOD sector for over 26 years. She holds quals in psych, counselling, strategic organisational development, leadership management and leadership coaching. And she has a collection of horses, which require all of those skills. Jennifer assists NADA services to assess, improve and develop their consumer participation initiatives. She's also responsible for ensuring NADA's programs and services have input from people with living and lived experience and for supporting their consumer groups and network. She's an experienced frontline worker and holds a degree in social sciences. So without further ado, I will pass over to them. What I should note, though, for people is that this is being recorded and will eventually be lodged on YouTube as part of our seminar series. So, Michele and Jen, over to you.
Thanks, Michael. Welcome, everybody. So we're talking about becoming gender responsive today. So I'll just go through a quick acknowledgement of where I am today, which is I'm on the lands of the Wiradjuri people in regional New South Wales, and pay respects to elders past, present and emerging. And thank you to Michael for doing an acknowledgement for people of lived and living experience, because we're at NADA, we also like to do that when we're presenting. So we'll just do some introductions, and then it'd be good to know where you guys are from too. Given that we've got small numbers, we'll be able to go around, just have a quick, and I'll get Jen to do that because I can't see anybody because I'm sharing the screen. But firstly, as you said, we work for NADA, which is the New South Wales cousin of SANDAS. And we have about 85 member services across New South Wales, and ranging from harm min right all the way through to the TC-based resi services, so the whole spectrum. We have a number of women's services, so specifically for women and children. And some of them take people on opioid treatment, some of them take only babies, some of them take children up to the age of 8 or 12, and multiple children for the women. So there was a need for specific gender responsive treatment sort of guidelines for services, given the nature of clients that were presenting. So we have we have a number of networks. We have a women's clinical care network, and this resource that we're talking to today, which is the Working with Women resource, was developed out of that as a response to the needs of the sector. We also have a number of other resources, some of which are pictured there as well. And they're all available on our resources page on the NADA website, which we can give you the link to later. So Jen, did you want to say anything else now?
Not on this one, no. I'm someone with a lived experience. I'm an identified physician here at NADA, and part of what my role is at NADA is to ensure that we get living and lived experience into a lot of the work that we do. So we have a consumer advisory group, and we also have a peer and living and lived experience network that I look after, community practice. So it's really fantastic that, anything that we do really has a consumer voice in it.
All right, thanks, Jen. Can we just go around and just give a brief, name and where you're from? Jen, if you could lead that, Jen, because I can't see people.
Sure. So I've got Melanie.
Yeah, hello. Look, you can call me Mel for the purposes of today. I work at Baptist Care in South Australia. So we have a couple of AOD programs for young people. We have a program called Tumble and Outreach, where we do group adventure therapy for young people in school-aged young people, high school, which is a harm minimisation and early intervention program. And we also have a residential rehab farm for young people 16 to 24 in the Adelaide Hills, which started off as a male-only service. We've opened that up in probably the last 18 months or so to include young women and gender diversity. So, really interested in this conversation today. We've certainly found some particular needs for the young women who access our program. So yeah, that's me.
Thanks, Mel. I've got, it says King.
Somebody, Jules, she's put it in the chat.
Jules is having mic tech issues. Is from DASA and coordinates community participation program. Fantastic. Jennifer, sorry. Yeah,
I'm with DASA as well. I'm with the comorbidity program. So we in-reach to mental health. I'm up here in the north.
Awesome. Thanks, Jennifer. And Judy?
Oh, another DASA. Sorry. Let me put my camera on. Another DASA. I'm working in the withdrawal services unit at Glenside.
Awesome. Thanks, Judy. And Katie? Yeah, on mute, Katie.
Oh, sorry. Let's start again. Sorry, I'm late. Sorry, my camera was off and I was on mute. My name's Katie Ryan. I'm the RTO manager at Ngunnawal Warrandyte, so I'm coming in from a learning perspective.
Awesome. Thanks, Katie. And then Nicole, if you wanted to.
Hi everyone. So I'm the Quality and Communications Officer here at SANDAS, and I think Michael put in the chat we're on Kaurna country.
Beautiful. Thanks, Nicole.
Thank you.
That's everyone, Michelle.
Cool. Thank you, everybody. It's good to know where you're coming in from. So Jen will lead off the move slides. We're talking a bit about language.
Yeah, so this is a language matters guide that you can access on the NADA website. It was a collaboration between NADA and NUA, which is the peer-based organisation in New South Wales. And it really was kind of directed to support AOD workers or other workers in using person-centred language when talking about drugs and alcohol and people that use drugs and alcohol. It's also, you know, language can be stigmatising and it can prevent people from accessing support services as well. The guide itself definitely as well recognises context, so that there is in certain situations what language might seem stigmatising is not stigmatising in that sense, and also that people with a living and lived experience have a right to talk about themselves and their experience in a way that they are comfortable with. So it's not to censor people that with living and lived experience, it's more of a guide for you know, to ensure that people feel respected and safe when they access services.
Okay, so being gender responsive is sometimes the gender inequality in treatment settings it can be overlooked when we have generalist sort of services. So there's a dominant lens through which substance misuse can be judged, and we'll get a bit more into that a bit later when Jen talks about stigma. But sort of the whole idea around this resource was to build recognition of the ways in which gender shapes women's experiences of treatment and substance use, and to create an environment that is more gender responsive and meeting their needs. So that AOD treatment is shaped by women and responsive to their experiences. So thinking about a gendered society, we've been doing a bit of research lately. Our research officer, May, she's just in the process of writing a paper on this very topic. It's around women in residential treatment, so women's only services compared to mixed gendered services, and found the short version is that she found that women had better outcomes and completed treatment more often in women's specific services. So that's with women and children. So we have a database which supported that. So New South Wales has database, which is a sort of repository for all the services data, which then goes off to the funding bodies. So she looked at over 266,000 episodes across a 10-year period, found that the average age of women presenting to services was 36, and 40% of those women had as primary substance of methamphetamine. A lack of stable accommodation was a high factor as well. Referrals from criminal justice setting. Around a fifth of the women were Aboriginal and or Torres Strait Islander as well. And that they were almost twice as likely to complete treatment this is specifically at the residential services if it was a women's only service. So, and she's still in the process of writing that up now, which is quite interesting. So thinking about being gender responsive, and Jen, I'll need your help here again to see people. What experiences do you think are unique to women who are accessing treatment? What are some of the considerations you might have if a woman's presenting to a service?
Did anyone want to, I don't want to put anyone on the spot really, but I know Melanie, you were saying that you've recognised so far already. Like, is there anything you wanted to speak to on that one?
Yeah, so what we've noticed is a lot of young women with borderline personality disorder and just that real combination of vulnerabilities that you kind of alluded to there in your intro, Michelle, and also the sexual exploitation component is almost across the board for the young women that we've seen and spoken to so far.
Thanks, Mel. Did anyone else want to jump in? What experience do you think are unique for women who use alcohol and other drugs?
Yeah, I think I agree with Mel that the area that really doesn't get covered as it should is that sexual health side of things and that sexual exploitation. I mean, we try to address it, but I think it is a whole area that we don't really shine a light in as well as we perhaps could.
Yeah, good point.
Anyone else want to think that's it, Michelle?
I guess
Oh, yeah,
also the classic one is that the greatest burden of child raising is still within the front for women. And so that whole issue of how do you stay being a parent or how are you judged as a parent when you're someone or as a mother when you're someone that's using substances or have previously used substances.
Yeah, that's really important to acknowledge as well, and we'll talk a bit about that when we talk about the stigma around it. All right, that's it. Okay, so just a bit more to think about is how can treatment be shaped by gender? So what different language might we need to use, or the delivery, it might be the setting, so all those sorts of things, changing physical settings, rooms, it might be the physical environment, the safety, it might be that's psychological as well as physical safety in the setting, and that applies across all services, so community-based as well as residential. So we'll just talk a bit more about the stigma around the use of alcohol and other drugs, particularly relating to women. Oops, skipped one. There we go.
Yeah, so like everyone's kind of already mentioned, stigma, AOD use itself is so highly stigmatized as it is. And then when it's a woman that has the experience of drug and alcohol use, that stigma is increased. There's several theories relate to the stigma and discrimination experienced by women who use alcohol and other drugs, and it's usually based on like traditional views of a woman's role in society. So according to research, stigma for women who use any licit or illicit drugs is more severe than for men because of women's place in society, as those who bear and rear children and who are seen to uphold the moral and spiritual values of society. There is also a negative stereotype that women users are sexually promiscuous because of their drug or alcohol use. This association is not seen in men. So like what's been mentioned, talking about women and sexual exploitation, that's not a conversation that happens for men. The questioning of a woman's ability to be maternal and raise children that doesn't get questioned for men when they use drugs and alcohol. And then it's additional things, where someone can have a glass of wine at the end of the day and that's not stigmatized, but if someone was to use heroin at the end of the day, that would be highly stigmatized, and then just increased for women. So while stigma is potentially of concern for all substance users, women with drug and alcohol issues face a significant social stigma and discrimination in relation to pregnancy and parenting, along with the barriers posed by family responsibilities or lack of childcare options if they were to seek treatment. The stigma of being a substance using mother and the fear of losing custody of children are significant, which is also really common, as you'll hear of someone who is struggling and would probably like to access treatment, but being a mother, the fear of losing their children is a real barrier, because services like external services, not AOD services, do have that unconscious bias and stigma, I would say, towards it. So recent research from the Centre for Social Research in Health, New South Wales shows negative treatment from health workers was reported by 45% of participants and was associated with being a woman, receptive needle syringe sharing, hospitalisation for drug use, and or arrest for drug use and possession. Women's experience of use and treatment. Gender is a dominant lens, which I think that was covered actually. Anyway, AOD use is so highly common in Australia. It is and it is more prevalent among males than females, and you'll see usually males accessing services more than women. So when women do access the service, it's a giant step, you know. Females are far less likely than males to use either illicit or illicit substances. Around 2/3 are male. So in the National Drug Strategy household survey, we're found to be around half as likely as males to either drink daily or to have injected any drug in the past year. The main exception to this pattern is the use of pharmaceuticals and prescription drugs for non-medical purposes. An equal number of men and women reported using pharmaceuticals such as analgesics, sedatives, steroids or opiates in a non-prescribed way in the past 12 months. In Australia, the estimated prevalence of harmful substance use or dependence disorders among women is around half of that of men. And alcohol is the most common principal drug of concern for both women and men seeking treatment, and male clients made up the majority of treatment episodes. So this is an excerpt from the guide as well.
Yeah, so all the pages that are yellow in the slides come straight from that Working with Women guide that you can download.
So this one in kind of been touched on as well already, but the complex contributing factors for women accessing treatment. So mental health, women who use alcohol and other drugs have a higher prevalence of co-occurring mental health issues such as mood, anxiety, post-traumatic stress disorder and eating disorders than men. Personal relationships and family history appear to be more significant influence on a woman's initiation, pattern of use and continuation of problematic alcohol and drug use than for men. Lack of education and work opportunities. Women have problems related to a lack of employment and vocational skills, report financial dependence on partners or others. Criminal justice issues. Male detainees were more than twice as likely to have paid employment. Women were more likely to be on a benefit and have dependent children. And cognitive impairment is often missed at assessment and can contribute to poor retention in treatment. Women entering treatment will present with, you know, a mix of all of these, social and economic disadvantage. Yeah.
Did anyone have any comments so far or any questions?
Anything surprising to you or anything you disagree with?
It feels pretty true for us so far, yeah.
Awesome.
All right, many of the women accessing treatment, pharmacotherapy is, I'm not sure about down there, but in New South Wales is a distinct lack of GPs who are willing to prescribe opioid treatment, and the inconsistent care planning as well. Often there isn't any case management or wraparound support around women that are on prescription medications or pharmacotherapy. There's also parenting is a big limiting factor as well. Lack of treatment places available for women with children in their care. A lot of our services that take women with children will take up to 2 children per mother, which for logistical reasons, there's limitations on what they can do within a residential setting. So there's all the other considerations you have to have as well. They're still supporting potentially other children at home while they've got kids with them as well. And then there's who do the other children actually placed with. So there's an increasing number of women also that are involved with children in out-of-home care. So that And a lot of women, particularly since COVID, we noticed that there are a lot of women, the vast majority of women were referred to women's treatment services were referred by DCJ, so Child Protection, whereas prior to that, there was nowhere near the same numbers that were referred from there. Complexity, so trauma is an obvious one that comes up again and again. Cognitive impairment, obviously, acquired brain injury, those sorts of things. We're noticing an ageing cohort as well of clients presenting to services with more complex health issues. Greater numbers also of first-time treatment seekers and well-resourced older women who are presenting for treatment. Housing is another area of need. That's we've been talking to housing providers and women's shelters and that sort of thing on how we can work better across sectors, because a lot of refuges and women's housing services won't take women on who are using alcohol or other drugs, or potentially on opioid treatment as well. So we've been talking to providers in that sector around how we can work better together to provide the services that people need. And domestic violence is another area as well. There's a huge crossover in our sector, which none of this would be news to any of you, I'm sure. Pharmacotherapy obviously works best combined with other interventions such as case management, wraparound support, potentially resi rehab as well. And particularly for women with children, it's really important to have contact. So some of the more traditional resi services may not let people have as much contact, whereas other ones might be able to FaceTime their kids every evening at bedtime or something like that if they don't have their kids with them, which is really important part of the process for women particularly.
So creating supportive environments. A supportive environment for women requires a gender responsive approach where AOD treatment is shaped by and is responsive to women, gender diversity and their experiences. This can be done in women-only services, in mixed gender services, all types of services, but women do need a specific response. Some components of the treatment that create an enabling environment for women is access to prenatal care and childcare. And I think being really clear on what kind of access and what kind of support is available to a woman who is pregnant or has children when accessing AOD is important. As well, access women's health supports. So as well, you know, like has been mentioned around like the sexual exploitation as well. A lot of the time that those, you know, women's health to be checked. Access to women-only programs, psychoeducational session topics that focus on women, mental health interventions, and comprehensive services that offer multiple components. So it'd be really important just recognising, like we are, that women do need a specific response and different support services as well.
So we'll just have a run through of best practice approaches, which again wouldn't be news to any of you, I'm sure. So we'll start with trauma-informed practice. So obviously the first stage of any treatment is to build the connection with somebody. So work with them where they're at, be very client person-centered, emphasis on building the relationship. And I mean, research has shown that the best outcomes are achieved when you've got that solid connection and that relationship first. And the actual interventions, while important, might be more secondary to the actual relationship that you've got with the person. Focus on choice. It's very much ensuring that people have a choice in their treatment, that the treatment is what, and their goals of what they want to achieve out of it. that they've got safety in that as well, and harm minimisation. So again, meeting them where they're at. Obviously, collaboration with clients as well, and working at their own pace. So it's not very much not a one-size-fits-all treatment. So this is a page, again, out of the resource, which just goes into the examples of trauma-informed practice and evidence-based substance use approaches and where they coincide. So we do have a QR code at the end as well that you can access this resource from. Oops. So people often do talk about trauma-informed care, but what does that actually mean? Does anyone want to throw it out there?
I'll jump in, Michelle.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I guess I think about the 3 pillars of trauma-informed care: safety, connection, and co-regulation. So safety looks like a lot of things, social, emotional, physical, covering all of the things. Connection, the importance of relationship and safety in relationship. And then, just supporting people to co-regulate and provide those skills when things come unstuck. So they're probably the things that I think about for trauma-informed practice. I find that a really simple, quick mental picture for me to remember.
Yeah, that's a great way of remembering it. Yep. Anyone else? You're the only person I can see. No?
I think
Right.
I think more simply, I agree with what you said. I think I simplify it for me and just think about holding that space with the client at the center of everything, of every thought, and of every experience. So checking in with them, and just centered around them, and understanding that it may look different, and needs and responses may be different from one person to the next, because each person holds their own trauma in different ways and has different stories. So it has to be centered around the individual. Definitely not a one-size approach fits when considering, engagement or interaction or response with people.
Yeah, that's really good. So how would, because in New South Wales there's been fairly recent funding and positions created for peer workers. How would peer workers help in that process if a woman's coming to a service?
I'm happy to start, and then someone else can come. Peer workers bring their lived experience in a safe way to share with others. So it's pinned by, the lived experience framework, which is around safety for that individual sharing their experience, and safety for the person receiving. And I think it's I think it's a really valuable way to hold space and work alongside people, where you can, refer to what's worked for you and your successes and your life experience, to help guide, not direct, but to help guide the person to inform what choices they might be contemplating. So it's still going back to that individual to consider, as opposed to being, put upon them. It's an option, it's a toolkit, it's something that's worked and it's shared very safely.
Yeah, and that's what I was trying to get at too is the safety aspect of it, the physical and psychological safety of and having that choice to be able to disclose and not feeling judged and those sorts of things. Did you want to add anything, Jen?
Yeah, I just think as peer workers, they add such a value in the sense that if, say, someone's accessing a service for the first time, it gives a bit of a comfortability. It can be an encouraging, you know, that this is a safe place for you to access, to go, like, what are your goals? And like, makes a really powerful, like, multidisciplinary team. I don't know if you've got many down in South Australia, but yeah, I think they add such a level of safety for people accessing services and encouragement to, you know, choose and chase their identified goals. But I love what you said, Katie.
Yeah. I think it also comes down to, like, you can't be what you can't see.
I love that.
You know, so for consumers or clients coming into the service, if they can immediately see that there are people there who know what the challenges are, but they also know what recovery looks like, and they live that every day, and they understand what it looks like and feels like in the real world, then I think that's, you know, then that just makes that space genuine, and for a place to be safe, it has to be genuine.
Yeah. And I think recognising as well that even without identified positions, just how much of the AOD workforce does have a living and lived experience in some capacity of AOD, you know, and sometimes that's not allowed to be disclosed. So the peer worker being able to disclose that can be really empowering for people accessing services. But just recognising that, you know, there is that experience within AOD. Workforce. Yeah,
I really like that. I wrote it down. You can't be what you can't see.
Yeah.
Because we have a saying that's nothing about us without us.
Which we stole though from the disability sector. Yeah.
Yeah. But it's similar sort of thing. Yeah.
Yeah.
About giving people a voice in their treatment. Which is so important. So, what about being trustworthy as a service? How might you, like, with consistency, transparency, boundaries, what sort of things might you need to modify to make sure that comes across? Are there any differences between men and women with that, do you think?
I don't think in the fundamentals there are differences in that sense of, you know, trust and transparency should be key sort of tenets that you're engaging with any client, however they identify themselves. I guess for some women though, if because of past experiences and trauma and you know, they may not have the same voice as the male in the room, and we know just by the nature of it that you put men in a room and they will dominate, that we might have to work harder at providing environments where women do have a voice, because they mightn't, you know, they haven't got a voice outside, so they might feel that they haven't got the skills to sort of talk about how they really want to talk because they've never had that opportunity before. And I think that summers that gender difference.
Yeah, that's a really good point.
I think as well, women being, if they're impacted by external kind of authority services, so if they've come from the criminal justice system or if they're involved with DCJ and children, I think to build the trust and be really transparent with them, even though sometimes those external organisations move the goalposts, it's still being really transparent and clear about, you know, what your role is to them and how you can support that person, that woman that's in front of you.
I think also, unfortunately, we have to acknowledge our limitations sometimes. And like, if you have to be honest, don't you? You have to say not to promise something that we can't deliver.
That's right.
Because I think, you know, these women have had lots of broken promises. And that's partly sometimes when I think about trauma-informed care, to make sure that I'm not adding, are we adding to the trauma?
Yeah. I think that's as well where the language that we use is so important.
Yep. All right, we've already talked about this, but yeah, just having a think about how, if needed, the services you provide might change physically, or how you can adapt.
So family inclusive practice, a family inclusive or family sensitive approach recognises the possibility of harnessing constructive support from family members. This helps set the client up for support once treatment is finished and ensures a solid transfer of care plan for the rest of their journey. What steps have your organisation taken to be more family inclusive? Also recognising, though, with this one that, you know, family dynamics are usually complicated when someone's accessing treatment for AOD. And I believe, and my experience is that AOD workers should be supportive of the client, and to not, especially when it comes to families that maybe there's some domestic and family violence, very careful not to collude or to, you know, sorry, that was just my little throw in there. Sorry, Michelle.
All right.
But yeah, I think as well, it's just a clear support for a woman and her choices, especially when it comes to family and family dynamics in past and present and moving forward. But have any of your organisations taken any steps to be more family inclusive?
So part of our model at Tumberland Farm is we talk a lot about community of support. That might be family, or it could be anyone, really. Yeah, so we kind of recognise that young people who find themselves at rehab have probably burned some relationship bridges. So one of the things we try and do within the first month or so is bring in family, whoever, but usually family, to kind of do a bit of a repair, you know, as far as we're able to, a bit of a repair conversation. And then as they kind of progress through the program, a bit of a how are we going and where are we headed? And then as they're preparing to leave, what does that look like after they've left the farm, and what are the rules of engagement? Kind of both ways, because you know, young people have ideas about what they want for their lives and their relationships. So yeah, that's one of the ways we try to do this. We've actually got an interview, like an intake interview today, with a young woman who has an infant. So, I mean, we can't take the infant at the farm, but just thinking about how we might be able to be flexible in our program to promote and support contact differently for that relationship than we do generally with family relationships. So, yeah, just giving thought to what that could look like for her, so we can support her to get treatment, but also support her connection with her child. So yeah, it's kind of relevant this week.
Yeah, that's great.
Really thinking about it. So yeah, that's plenty of talking from me. Thank you for listening.
That's really good. I think that attachment for a mother and an infant, you know, recognizing that is family inclusive, and you know, can change the directory of her life and the infant's life, you know, so well done.
Yeah, it can be so hard, and we sometimes have women in services with women who have their children with them who can't feel they can't stay because they can't cope with not having their children with them when they see everyone else's kids. It can be really tricky, and it can be tricky the other way around too, leaving them at home and nobody's, yeah. So yeah, good job. Interesting to see how she goes. They go, yeah.
So this is just a strength-based, resilience-orientated framework, the Women's Network model of care. So the continuum of care, holistic approach, empowering environment, and evidence-based treatment practices.
Yeah, the AOD Women's Network model of care was another resource that the network came up with. So around and this was community-based services as well as resi services, came up with the model of care. So sexual health for women, that's often an area that is completely neglected when people are using alcohol and other drugs. Less likely to have routine checkups, less likely to engage with GPs. Fairly significant, particularly I used to work in Darlinghurst in Sydney, and that was a fairly high proportion of women accessing treatment who had worked as sex workers. Pregnancy's another area that is often women don't know they're pregnant till they access treatment and get a pregnancy test. So it's really important to make sure that we don't scare people off. Or other areas of need might be older women as well, who with perimenopause or menopause symptoms, we might exacerbate withdrawal symptoms or be mistaken for other symptoms, or that sort of thing. So there's a lot of things going on in that space for women, and often a neglected space as well. So obviously another area is asking about safety. So in New South Wales, we've been looking into the use of screening tools, and one of them amongst that is the DV screening tool. So it has been an area where a lot of staff have been unsure about how to have the conversation around asking the questions, and also talking to men who come into services who are potentially using violence. How do we screen them, and what do we do with that information? So as Jen mentioned earlier, people are wary about colluding with that sort of talk around use of violence from men. When it comes to women, we need to be asking the questions, and whichever screening tool we use, we need to be doing something with that information. So incorporated into safety plans, looking around to see what services in the local area, if the woman's local or wherever they come from, what services they might be able to engage with if necessary, those sorts of things. Re-evaluating it as well. So in New South Wales, some services use the DV-SAT or the DVRS, which are a couple of different tools, and then work with local domestic and family violence services as well. So the questions, yeah, as I said, sometimes staff feel a bit hesitant to actually ask. And it's about how do we talk to people also about child protection, and whether or not being mandatory reporters, whether or not we have to report anything. It could also bring up people's own experiences and triggers that they may have, which is important to acknowledge as well. So yeah, it can be quite confronting for staff. Diverse backgrounds as well is an important area. So recognising diversity of all sorts, and also asking if we're not sure about different diversity, whether it's cultural identity, sexual orientation, or gender as well. Now our minimum data set includes gender questions, which is a requirement for services to ask. So a lot of services or staff were unsure about how to ask those questions. So being curious and admitting sort of when you're wrong is always a good approach. But also, yeah, being sensitive. So best practice obviously is collaboration with relevant services. What networks are there in your local area to support people of diversity, whether it's multicultural, Aboriginal specific services, any particular networks, family and community. Sorry, I'm looking at the 5 minutes left warning on the meeting thing. So yeah, there's a whole range of diversity and that we can try and engage our local communities to try and support people as well. So LGBT obviously is another area, and transgender women. It's important not to make any assumptions. Let the client identify and then ask for preferences rather than assume that we know what they prefer. So things to consider. This is just not asking for any input at this stage, but unless you want to say something. So just considerations. So what sort of language you use, what practices are used, what can be enhanced in your organisation. Would your clients describe your place as a safe place? Is that something you ask? Do they attend to their sexual and reproductive health? Is DV explored? Are there screening tools used? Those sorts of things. Is parenting explored? So if someone comes into the service, there are questions about if they have children, who's looking after them, those sorts of things. What sort of relationship do they have with their children? What partnerships with stakeholders might be relevant or helpful, or are there, or might need to be developed? Do you talk about gender in staff meeting? Does it have any impact on how services are delivered? And are women asked how the service or what do they need in a client treatment survey? That was it for the information. It's a very quick snapshot of what's in the resource. So if you want the full version, just feel free to download the resource. But we always think it's important just to remind people as well about your own well-being. Working in this sector can be quite draining and hectic and very rewarding at the same time. So it's really important that we look after each other and ourselves and maintain connections with the important people in your life. So, and whatever self-care looks like to you is really important as well. So that's pretty much it from us. But if you've got any final questions or if you want to know more, you can contact us, and that barcode will take you to the resource that you can download.